we must be the leader of our team. We're dictated now by the insurance companies telling us who we can and can't see. Keep a medical journal so that you can quickly say to each physician, this is what's going on. Be your own leader and advocate and speak up, because that's the only way you will get the treatments that you need that are right for you and for your body.
Welcome to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, the podcast for high achievers who want to stay sharp, focused, and full of energy despite their diagnosis. With your host, National Board Certified Functional Medicine Health Coach, Julie Michelson, where Julie helps you take your power back from autoimmunity. And now here's your host, Julie Michelson.
Welcome back to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast. I'm your host, Julie Michelson, and today we're joined by Rhonda Nelson, renowned patient advocate, author, speaker, and philanthropist. She's a beacon of resilience and strength. Rhonda serves on the executive board of directors with the Asthma and Allergy Network, impacts legislation, and speaks nationally, raising awareness for AERD, Aspirin Exasperated Respiratory Disease. Having dealt with it herself for more than 20 years, Rhonda has experienced many misdiagnoses, a near fatal struggle to find relief, a desperate search for answers, and a constant journey to access proper support. Rhonda and her husband, Wayne, of the Little River Band, tirelessly devote their time and resources to helping others navigate this often challenging medical journey. In today's conversation, we're talking about the importance of advocating for ourselves and finding the right physicians to support our journey. We talk about AERD and chronic inflammation and how important it is for us to incorporate healthy lifestyle into our approach to wellness in order to optimize quality of life. Rhonda, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
It is absolutely my pleasure. I'm excited for our conversation. I love talking about stuff we haven't talked about before on the podcast. And I always really get it because I'm such a geek. I get excited when I'm reading about people and doing some research and I'm like, wow, I've never even heard of that. So I am very excited for you to share your journey with us. If you could just start by, sharing, I guess, your health journey first, but whatever parts of your journey you feel called to share with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And I want to preface all this by saying I get super excited when I hear people say, I haven't heard about this before. And it opens another door for me to advocate for the disease, which is AERD. I'll explain that in a minute.
Yep.
But then also advocate for patients in general.
Yes. And that's the big picture of why why I have the podcast, right? And why we're having this conversation, because we'll get into it, but being our own advocates is important. And I know the work that you have now been called to do is shedding a lot of light on AERD.
Yeah. So I'll just jump in. So AERD is short for Aspirin Exasperated Respiratory Disease. It was formerly called Samter's Triad, but everyone now we refer to it as AERD. And so back in 2000, I got sick. It was at the very beginning of the year, and it was in January. I thought I had a cold, but we also were spending a bit of time in California as well, and I thought it possibly could be some seasonal allergy things. So I didn't think a lot about it until we got back home, and this just kept getting worse and worse. And I would wake up in the night, gasping to breathe. I would have these flares where I would sneeze. And I don't mean just a tiny achoo. I mean rib breaking,
Ouch.
Sneezing for hours and hours. this would go on. And so, as you do, you start to try to figure out what's going on. And you know, just by process of elimination, I started with an allergy. And, they said, oh, well, you're allergic to trees and grass and mold and blah. But we were getting nowhere. But we then found out that I also had nasal polyps.
Mm.
And so that it was recommended that I have a surgery to have those removed, but I'm still getting nowhere, right? And these attacks, if you will, or flares of like literally my throat closing and gasping for air, were still happening. So we knew something still wasn't right.
Mhm.
And I had never had asthma as a kid. And so it just was, we're just on this quest to find out. And it took 2 years to find a physician that actually penned the diagnosis and knew exactly what I had. And then that led down a path of, finding the right maintenance meds and such as that. So now going back 22 years, it was different then than it is now. It was much more difficult to diagnose then. The medical or the medicine maintenance that was available, obviously we've had some advancements and it's better. And so things, it's been great to see those advances throughout the years. But it was really challenging in the beginning with the diagnosis.
Which I can imagine, and I'm sure there's some listeners, I think most listeners know what it's like to hunt for a diagnosis. And there's some, I don't actually know. I need to find out the current stats of back when I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, the average autoimmune condition took 8 years to get a diagnosis. I think now it's so on the radar. And I always end up saying, like, I wish you hadn't been diagnosed. Let's just reverse it all.
Right.
But this is a little different. And we'll talk a little bit about that, the emotional piece of, hunting for the diagnosis. As I was listening to your story, I'm like, yeah, they're going after the symptoms, right? Like, oh, the asthma is allergy related. Oh, get the polyps removed. But like, why do you have
Why?
nasal polyps? And are they just going to come back? Like, so I want to just, again, because I had never heard of AERD, and exacerbated is in the name, but this is not caused by you taking aspirin, correct?
No.
Okay.
It's a chronic inflammatory disorder of the sinuses and lungs. It's if you will, to be simplistic, it's a chemical imbalance within the patient's body. The exact cause is not known, but we do know that it is not an allergic response. So having said that, it's also not considered an autoimmune disorder.
Yet.
Correct. I always say the operative word is going to be yet.
Right. Well, when you hear, chronic inflammatory,
right? Exactly.
But then interestingly, aspirin and NSAIDs and things people typically do to reduce inflammation before they know other ways actually make it worse.
Actually will send you into the anaphylactic shock.
Wow.
And so therefore, just treating your basic headache or your basic backache, or we moved and I moved a lot of boxes and now I'm just stiff and sore, and so we typically will reach for an NSAID or an aspirin. You can't do that.
Don't do that. No.
Right. So it creates some complications when we're starting to look at then, what do we do day to day to maintain? But I think we've also come a long way in understanding inflammation within the body. And I know they don't want to call this an autoimmune disorder, but
With
if
semantics, right?
right, exactly. So by eliminating inflammation within your body, it has been shown in patients to it doesn't cure this disease because at this point there's no cure for AERD. But what it does is it allows for a little better quality of life, a little better disease maintenance, if you will. And so there's a lot of different things that you can try. Now, some of those things your doctor will probably look at you and tell you you're
Oh,
crazy.
yeah, mine
So
did.
that's exactly.
That's
So
okay.
that's the other thing. And that's where I really get on the platform and say, hey, wait a minute. Yes, we trust our doctors, and yes, we need our doctors to give us a diagnosis, but then it's somewhat going to be up to us as the patients to
Yeah.
go down the road to figure out other things that will help heal the body from within, in addition to the meds that we have to take. Because if you start to heal from within, then you will most likely, and some patients have, be able to come off of or step down from some of these chemical medications that we're putting into our bodies.
Which is
So,
fantastic. But I always say too, the goal is to feel your best, right? So
absolutely.
if you think of step one of like these other things we can do to reduce inflammation, is hey, let's just let the medication work better. And a
Right.
lot of people think I'm anti-prescription because I came off of all of mine, but it was just as you said, I was healing from within and my doctors were taking my meds away, cutting them back, taking them away. But the goal is always quality of life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
100.
I love, we're very aligned in that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's no badge of do you take a prescription or do you not? Like, who cares?
Who cares?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think and especially in my case, I don't like to take medications. And so
Right.
when I
Me
see
either.
all of these medications,
Uh-huh.
I'm concerned as to, while yes, they will help the issue at hand,
Yeah. And what
what
else?
are they doing
Yeah.
that isn't healthy or isn't helping my body?
Yeah. I agree. I agree. But first is always, hey, let's, especially as we're figuring stuff out. And I did go through a phase in my healing journey where and it's because of the throw medication first approach, that I
Hmm.
became very opposed to, and now I'm like, no, there is a time and a place to
Right.
control some things. And
And I will tell you, until I was controlled with meds,
yeah,
I didn't have the energy or the brain power
yep,
to even go down a road of looking
sure.
at other modalities that would be beneficial to me and to my body. It wasn't until I got stabilized and got the quality of life that we spoke about back
Sure.
that then I was like, okay, this is great. we've we've gone from really the worst possible scenario to now we have a diagnosis to now we have some meds that will
Right.
settle things down, if you
Yeah.
will.
Yeah.
And then I can start to focus on the other things. And in my case, there were quite a few drugs. And so, okay, let's get stabilized, and then let's start to see what we can and cannot eliminate.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you experience this too. Your physicians or your medical team is not always on board with that. Like they sometimes are like, nope, you must take this and you'll never be able to
Yeah.
get off of this. End of story. I think we've advanced in our ways of thinking. We've advanced in understanding health and what is healthy for our bodies. So I think we are, as a population, becoming more in tune to thank you for the meds, thank you for the help. I'm going to explore these things too. And I'm going to continue to listen to my medical team, but I'm also going to do my own research for my own body, because my body, your body, and everybody else's body is not the same, and we don't react the same.
Amen.
Yeah.
And listeners know, I am definitely not anti-physician. I'm,
Yeah, me either.
marrying
Me.
one shortly. So, and I'm very grateful, though he's a functional medicine physician, so we're aligned. But I do think historically we have been kind of trained to the kind of, doctors know it all and they have the answers and we have to do exactly what they say.
Mhm.
And B, I think, at least I did when I was younger, we tend to think that the prescription is the fix.
Correct.
And it,
When in fact,
I
it's just
don't
the
know of a
Band-Aid.
prescription that cures anything.
It's a Band-Aid.
Yeah. And sometimes a very necessary one, as
Right.
again. But so I love that. And the other thing that kind of goes along with advocating for yourself that I know a lot of people are still really uncomfortable with is you don't have to stay with a physician who has a completely opposite ideology from you.
That is correct.
Working with somebody who isn't open, it doesn't mean they have to agree with everything you want to try, because that to find a physician that's going to do that is really tough.
Yes.
But we forget that we hire our physician, and therefore, if it's not the right fit, we can find another one.
So I love that you just said that. We hire our physicians,
Yes.
because I just had this discussion the other day. Whenever I have my first appointment with a new physician, that is, in my mind, the interview.
Yes. Yes.
Because it doesn't matter if everything else about the practice, the person, the protocols that they might prescribe, that can all be perfect, 100% spot on. But if that physician and myself cannot gel, cannot have a conversation, and I cannot express the things that I need to express, it is not a good fit. It is it's not going to be. I think maybe our parents' generations and before, they went to the doctor, what the doctor said was the gospel, and that was the end of it, right? And we would typically hear, I mean, I'm sure people of our generations that have older parents, oh, my mom or my dad, they're on so many medications.
Yeah.
Well, yes, because that's what doctors did.
Right.
Number one. Number two, those generations never left their physicians,
Right.
unless they, for the most part.
Yeah.
And they also thought everything they said was the gospel.
Yes.
And so they would not dare do anything different than what the physician said. Not only that, they would never speak up if they didn't agree or didn't understand something.
True.
So, I think we've come a long way. And I hope younger people continue to do that, because, it's just important to know what a drug is doing to the rest of your body, as it is to know what it's doing to the disease that you have, or doing for the disease that you have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, knowing in hindsight, anybody who says what obviously you were told, and I was, that you'll have this forever and you need to stay on X forever. I don't care what X is. Be skeptical, at least, and because the body is designed to heal.
Right.
And one of the things when I was listening to your journey, it just reminded me, I was like, well, I could see how difficult it could be to get an accurate diagnosis, because I'm guessing, the allergist is treating the asthma, and I'm assuming they sent you to an ENT when they found out you had the polyps, right?
And so then you have a pulmonologist in there as well.
Yeah, and so there's this, and I know most people have a primary care physician. But if your primary care physician's only spending 15 minutes with you during an appointment, that's different than having somebody lead your healthcare team who
Right.
sees the big picture.
Right.
And so I just wanted to highlight that for people that is kind of, it's one of the reasons it takes a long time to get, but then you get, it's that Western medicine, each organ system has its own specialist.
Right. As
And
a
they
treating
don't
the body as a whole.
talk to each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, they do not. And that is another thing that I stress, and I cannot stress enough. We must be the leader of our team.
Yes,
right?
please. Yes.
And so, but what makes it hard is that, we're dictated now by the insurance companies
Mhm.
telling us who we can and can't see, telling them how long they can spend with a patient, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, one of the biggest things I say, and I wish if I could have told my younger self this,
Mhm.
I would have done this. Keep a medical journal when you're in a situation where you don't have a diagnosis and you're trying to find that diagnosis, and then you get diagnosed and you have all these doctors who don't have barely enough time to see us, much less talk to the other doctors in your medical team, right?
Right.
Keep a medical journal so that you can quickly say to each physician, this is what's going on. This is what, Dr. So-and-so prescribed for me. This is what they said. I am not anti-physician. I am not anti-medication. I am pro be your own leader and advocate and speak up, because that's the only way that you will get the treatments that you need that are right for you and for your body.
Which I love, which goes back to, we are all individual. And
Right.
so nobody knows what's going on in our body better than we do.
Right.
And so I love that, because I do think it is a big shift to this idea of being your own healthcare advocate, right?
Right.
Being the leader of your healthcare team. And it doesn't mean we all need medical background. And,
No.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because and then I do want to get into a little bit more of your advocacy work, but where does someone start with, I know, I mean, I had a client who literally was terrified that her doctors were going to fire her if she spoke up.
Right.
And that was my reaction. I would laugh every time she would say it,
But it is a common thought that people have.
Why?
Because I feel like because the doctor has always been the smart one.
Right.
Right? That's what we were taught.
Right.
And so I feel like that's why people are a little timid to say, nope, hang on. I read so-and-so. And then the next fear is you're going to think that they think, oh, you got on the internet and you started reading, because we hear,
Yeah, Dr.
that
Google.
can be, yeah, exactly. It can be horrible. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's what you're doing just because you say, I've done some research,
Right.
And yeah, I feel like people are afraid to speak up.
Yeah. Do you have a recommendation of like, well, where do you, I mean, I love I think it's brilliant to keep a journal so that you can reference, because if you have 15 minutes, you're trying to remember the name of that medication that other doctor wants you to take and you can't remember it. Well, that's the end of that conversation.
Right.
So yeah, I really love that part.
Yeah.
I think that's really good advice. I joke, I became a health coach because I wish I had one, right?
Yeah.
So this is why we do what we do. And so, I appreciate, let's talk a little bit about that, how this shift from patient to advocate.
I just do. I could not be the only one that felt like this
Yeah.
or that was struggling with this. And I just would get so tired of going to a physician, regardless of whether it was a physician that I was seeing for AERD or whether it was a physician I was seeing for something else. I
Right.
didn't want to have to tell the same long drawn out story and then them look at me like a puppy dog cocking its head like, oh,
Uh-huh.
I just, so I started to approach the visits more as facts. Like, here are the facts between the last time I was here and here, as opposed to,
This is
well,
how
I
I
was
feel, and this is
exactly, exactly. Because I feel like I got, first of all, I was able to cram a lot more info into a short period of time. But then there was no like gray area. I was simply stating the facts of,
this is the
my,
experience.
this
Yeah.
is the experience. This is what's happening. Um, and so I think that that's important for people to realize your appointment is the time that you need to speak up.
Mm.
You don't just, it's not the time to go, yes, no, yes, no.
Right.
It's your appointment. It's, you are giving your information
I
and the
love that.
medical.
And that's a big shift for a lot of people. And that is, it's so important. It really is.
Really,
What was coming up for me, that this idea of I'm presenting the facts, right? I find especially women, although these days probably more and more men as well, get that when there are unexplained things, right? When, oh, but your labs look normal, and physicians don't know what to do, or instead of saying, I don't know how to help you, but I will walk this journey with you.
right.
They do tend to, a lot of times, patients leave the doctor feeling like they didn't believe me, or they think I'm crazy, or they offered me an antidepressant, or said, oh, you're tired because you have kids, or, what,
Yeah.
trying to just explain away. And so I love that idea of, let's take that whole judgment piece away. And you're just showing up like, these are the facts of, my experience between the last appointment and now, or, whenever.
But I also feel like that the chemistry has to be there too. So that's why
Yeah.
I say interview. First appointment,
Yes.
forget about it. It's an interview.
Yeah.
Interview and see if you
It
gel,
should be.
right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I just switched GPs. As a matter of fact, I had my first appointment not too long ago.
Yeah.
I wanted to switch because this particular one takes into consideration both Eastern and Western medicine. Things aren't, the things that I do that are in my regimen aren't foreign to her.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was important. But I told her right the minute she walked in the door, I said, it was comfortable to begin with. So I
Right.
knew it probably was going to be okay. But I said, this is really an interview and I'm interviewing you. I know you're asking me a lot of questions,
Right.
but I'm interviewing
I'm
you.
sitting here deciding, am I going to come back?
Silently interviewing you. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I love that. And you know
I,
what? I think for the most part, physicians appreciate that as well, because we see it, and again, it's a different lens being in a functional medicine practice. But we have patients that aren't a good fit because they're not willing to do the things. And
that's right.
so let's not waste each other's time.
Yep.
This, you're not going to get results just by visiting with the doctor. Like,
Right.
that's not magic.
If you're not going to enact what
Yeah.
they say and what works for you, then you're wasting your time and their time. So back to the question, why did I go from patient to patient advocate?
You had to.
I absolutely did. And, I feel like I have a platform and a pathway to use for good, where we can do some good. And also because AERD was not very well known back then. It is more known and diagnosed more now. But I just knew that it just was what my heart told me to do. And I knew that that's what I needed to follow.
Yep. Oh, I get it. I totally understand that for sure. Are you willing to share with us, are you comfortable to share with us some of these other things you do to feel your
Absolutely.
best?
Absolutely. For my disease specifically, doing a high omega-3, low omega-6 diet is very important.
For everybody.
It should be for everybody, right? But that's
Uh-huh.
neither here nor there. Supplements, I take a lot of supplements. Now, I am going to say this. I was on the American Lung Association podcast last week, and when I talk about supplements, the very first thing that I want to say to listeners is this: I happen to believe supplements are very beneficial for us.
Mhm.
However, you must do your research and you must discuss with your physician the supplements that you are researching and that you feel will benefit you, because they don't always play well with medications that you're on. And so you can really hurt and do more harm than good if you don't heed to that advice first and foremost. But I am a very big supporter of supplements because I think our diets are just of such that we don't get the things that we need. Um, I could go on and on
So I
about
know
that,
we
about
could have
how
probably
right
a whole
a whole
conversation.
we could talk a day
Yeah,
about
and
that.
I'll add to do your research, talk to your doctor, and when possible, though, targeted supplements. So not that you're never hearing about something and discussing and bringing it in, but people ask me all the time, well, what's one supplement everyone should take? Now, for the most part, I could say a really good omega-3, but
Right.
I have met the very rare occasional person who has beautiful omega-3s from diet.
Yeah. So they don't
So
need.
it's rare, but I say, like do your labs and find out what you need.
Yes.
And I like that. Yeah, they don't all play well together.
No. And the other thing too, check your resources where you get your supplements
Quality.
from.
Yes.
The quality, and yes, they can be expensive, but you can take a pure expensive supplement and reap the benefits, or you can get a supplement that is subpar and cause more harm than is good. So
Absolutely.
that
And
I'm very big on that. And then the other things that I do, just exercise, and I have my own routine, but what I say to people that maybe have never exercised in their life,
Mhm.
movement is important. We must keep our bodies moving. And so find out what that looks like for you. Is it a walk every day? Is it maybe you have a desk job and maybe you just get up every 30 minutes and you
Yeah.
do a loop at your office or go up and down the stairs in the stairwell? Or is it a workout routine in your home? Is it yoga? Whatever it is. And people may try tons of things before they find the one thing or two things that they like to do, will keep them involved and keep their attention to doing that particular exercise.
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with, just because someone doesn't go to the gym for
Yeah.
an hour a day doesn't mean they're not getting the exercise if they're doing a walk every morning before work or in the afternoon after work or whatever they're doing.
Yes.
But movement is key. We must move our bodies. So I'm really big on that. I'm really big on chiropractic care. I just feel like for me specifically, chiropractic care, if everything is in alignment, it seems all of my systems work a lot better.
That's fair.
Yeah, I do
Yeah.
red light therapy. I do acupuncture. I also have an infrared sauna at home. I do cold plunges. Um, I
We could
do
hang out.
I do a lot. But at the end of the day, if all of that makes me feel better and gives me the
Yeah.
energy I need to do the things I need, there's no harm done. And I always say, not every one of those things is going to be right for someone.
Oh,
My husband,
sure.
like acupuncture and cupping, I absolutely cannot wait for my weekly
Mhm.
appointment for that. My
Mhm.
husband can't stand it. He's just like, it's not that it doesn't feel like it's doing anything for me. It's just not for me.
It's not
Okay,
his
fair
thing.
enough. Right.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So he finds the thing that is.
And
And
I knew I know I promised you I wouldn't keep you too long or go down too many
I
rabbit
know, but
holes.
it's such a good conversation,
But you
right?
mentioned your husband, so I want to touch on, because we could do a whole episode on being a supportive partner.
Right.
But let's talk about that, because I feel like since you talk about it, it was an important part of your journey, and plenty of my listeners are not the ones with autoimmunity, right? It's a loved one or a family
Right.
member.
Mm-hmm.
So just can we just touch on that a
Touch
little
on
bit?
that a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say, I truly believe that a chronic illness can really test a relationship. It requires love, it requires understanding, it requires grace, and it requires patience on both parts,
Yes.
the caregiver side and the patient side, right? What I've learned over the years is that it's pure agony, or was pure agony, for my husband to see me having a flare or an attack, because especially the ones that sent me to the ER, and I'm turning blue and hoping that
Scary.
we can.
Yeah.
It's scary as hell, and so it was. Um, it's hard. It's hard on the caregiver. The other thing that I feel like is important is to realize that as exhausted as we are as patients, the caregiver is exhausted caregiving, whether that's mental caregiving or physically caregiving. And so we need to be aware of that. And I just would know, sometimes I would snap, like when before I
Sure.
was really medically maintained, right?
Mhm.
This doesn't so much apply now because I rarely have an attack. I was exhausted. I was drained, and I would snap, and I would get frustrated because maybe he
Sure.
wasn't putting the soup in the bowl that I would put it in, right?
Right.
So if you step back and you go, oh, wait a minute, this person is giving all that they can
Mm.
to help me.
Yes.
I need to give some in return to help them to be able to help me.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's a really big thing. And
And
and I
and
think
the communication too.
absolutely.
So many of us wait too long
Yeah.
to share. These are gems from my 50s. Through the biggest health challenges in my journey, I was a single mom.
Hmm.
Um, and so I hadn't experienced the kind of relationship where I had a truly supportive partner anyway. But I had to learn to allow someone to take care of me. And I had to
Yeah.
learn that, nobody, again, back to only we know what's going on inside our body unless we're communicating.
Right.
And so you might be it's a little different when, you're turning blue, then it becomes clear.
Yeah.
that,
Right. There's a problem.
yeah. But
Whoops.
for especially even the average listener, if they're at the beginning of a flare or they're flaring, and we try to just compensate and push through and do the things. And so, you know, you can't expect any partner or loved one to be able to support you if you aren't willing to be honest about how you're
That that
feeling.
that's true. And I want to add another piece, because this for a long time this was a problem for me, and because with my disease your rheumatoid arthritis, diseases of that nature, where on the outside we
You look fine.
perfectly healthy,
Yeah.
right? Look fine.
Mhm.
And I can't tell you how many times that I've had to cancel things with friends, with family, and they don't understand. So it's a two-part thing.
Yeah.
One, a caregiver could be in a certain situations a friend or a family member,
Sure.
not just a spouse or a
Sure.
significant other. So that communication, you have to be honest with them because they can't see outwardly that there's anything wrong.
Yeah.
Right. And so communication is, and then I think that um, being honest with them, especially with your circle of friends and the outer parts of your family. Those that live with you will
No.
pretty much know what's going
Yeah.
on day to day. It's as hard as it is to be honest because we don't want to be judged and feel like we're different or that people are judging us because we have an illness. And sometimes just saying I have a chronic incurable illness is hard for people to say, right?
Sure.
So because maybe they don't want to admit it in the first place, or they're struggling with what that means to them. So being honest with your friends and your family and even your employer, all of these relationships goes a long way in how people can help you
Sure.
and help you
Well,
through
because
your
the alternative, thinking about friends, because most of us with any kind of chronic illness, at some point life gets smaller because we don't have the energy. We are, or, we're, and so you, even though we often don't want to share, the personal medical things going on, and it doesn't mean you need to, have a 3-hour conversation with
exactly
everybody,
exactly
but eventually either you're the friend who flakes out and nobody knows why, right? You're unreliable,
right
or you can just be honest and then people understand and they get
yeah
to love you. Like,
exactly
yeah,
and it goes a long way. As hard as maybe being honest and admitting that you have this chronic illness, it goes a long way in helping them to understand who you are. So therefore you're not
yeah,
seen as the one that always flakes out.
right.
You're seen as, oh gosh, she's struggling with a flare right now,
Yeah,
but she'll be
it's
back.
important. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's
Exactly.
important. Well,
So
on a personal note, I want to just acknowledge the work that you do with the Asthma and Allergy Network. My really entry into any kind of chronic anything was as a young mom even before, um, definitely before diagnosis. I probably had symptoms, but 2 of my 3 children have life-threatening food allergies. And so Asthma and Allergy Network is an amazing organization. And so I just wanted to honor the work that you do with them as
thank you.
well, because
I
it's
couldn't be
important.
more proud to be
Yeah.
involved with an organization like them because the work that they do, not only just on the education side, but on the legislative side as well.
Yeah.
And especially listen, where food allergies come in, that's a whole nother thing. We could have a whole nother long conversation about that, but it is something that is real. It is life threatening, and the awareness needs to be there.
Absolutely. As a mom, with young kiddos at the time, they're adults now, but scary, just scary. And so that was a support I found early on, like you said, not just education and advocacy, but also resources. I remember
Yes,
as a young
tons.
mom, there were no food allergy cookbooks back then,
Right.
and so I just wanted to acknowledge that that was when I had first read your bio, I was like, I want to talk to her.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And I want to say this, and it's not just food allergies or asthma or anything like, because those are. I always struggle when people go, oh, it's just food allergies or it's just asthma.
Yeah.
It is not, there is no disease that is just whatever the disease is, right? And food allergies, asthma, so many of these things that we as a society typically put just in front of are
Yeah.
absolutely life threatening, serious diseases.
Yeah.
And I think that's a point that I will never stop making for as long as I live,
Yeah.
because it really annoys me to hear, oh, it's just food allergies,
Right.
you know,
Just anything,
just
you know.
anything. Exactly.
Yeah. And which is I think also a beautiful thing for all of us to remember for others as well, right? Like
Right.
it's not for any of us to say what is just
Yeah,
fill in the blank.
exactly.
And all of all of the chronic things, whether it's autoimmunity, asthma, serious allergies, there's a fear component, there's a scariness involved, whether it's realistic or not. Obviously, with anaphylaxis and asthma, it is realistic. I lived in fear for a long time because I didn't think I was going to be alive to see my kids grow.
Right.
And so we just, yeah, we can all take a step back and not judge anybody's, medical
Medical
struggles. Yeah,
struggles. Exactly. And I just, I really just say, if we just open our hearts and our heads a little bit more to, you know, just listening. And like you say, we
yeah.
don't have to share 4 hours worth of medical
Right.
history.
Nobody
And
really wants us to.
exactly. But just
Yeah.
something to let people know what you're struggling with. If we can open our heads and our hearts to that and have a little grace and understanding with everybody, I think we would find out that there's more people out there struggling with things that we don't even know about because they
Most.
don't want to talk about them.
Yeah. I say that to my staff all the time we have an amazing patient population at the clinic. And they're positive and but sometimes people are, especially as new patients, they've been struggling, they haven't been heard, they're scared, whatever, fill in the blank. And I always remind, like you don't know what's going on.
Yeah,
Always give that grace. And everybody's dealing with something
right.
for
Exactly.
real. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
So amazing. Rhonda, we're at the point of the conversation where listeners are leaning in because they know I'm going to ask you for one step that they can take starting today to improve their health. And it could be,
Wow. One step to improve your health.
mhm,
I would have to say, listen to your body. Don't discount anything as too small. And then an addition to that tip is start your medical journal today. Even if
love
you
it.
don't have anything that's really worrisome, just pay attention to what your body is saying and doing and document it. And listen, I used to think I could remember everything.
Oh,
And
sure.
in today's busy world,
Yeah.
well, we can't. You just can't remember, especially if you're not seeing a physician for 6 months or 8 months or a
Right.
year. You're not going to remember.
Yeah.
So I feel like for those of us who deal with chronic illnesses, one of the biggest and best things you can do for yourself is to keep a medical journal of your symptoms, and both positive
Right.
and the things that aren't going as well as you'd like them to go.
Yeah. I love that you added that because sometimes we forget to be intentional about connecting the dots to we make a change and we do improve and we're not paying close attention. So
Right.
I love that it's the positive, the negative, the changes.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
brilliant advice.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Where can listeners go to find out more about you for those that aren't going to check the show notes?
Sure. They can find me at my website, rhondabnelson.com.
Love it. Rhonda, thank you so very much for sharing your wisdom, for educating us. and just for sharing your journey and inspiring everybody to become their own health advocate.
Thank you. It has really been a pleasure. And obviously, it is a topic that I just love to talk about so much. And it's been such a pleasure.
Thank you. For everyone listening, remember you can get those show notes and transcripts by visiting inspiredliving.show. Hope you had a great time and enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity. Did you enjoy this episode? Please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to get a transcript of this and every other episode, just head on over to inspiredliving.show or click on the link in this episode's description. There, you can also find everything we discussed in this episode, including links and information about our guest. You can even send in your questions to be answered by Julie in a future episode. That's inspiredliving.show. Until next time, this is Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, helping you take your power back.